Welcome back, everybody. We're kicking off the new year with a whole lot to talk about,
Yeah, definitely a busy start to the year.
for sure. So first up, we've got these devastating wildfires ripping through Los Angeles.
I was reading that they're calling it an immediate threat to life situation. Pretty scary stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. They said over 27,000 acres have already burned.
Wow, 27,000. To put that into perspective, that's like the whole of central London, just gone.
It's hard to even imagine. And those Santa Ana ones they always talk about,
Oh, yeah.
those are just fueling the flames even more.
Making it so much harder to contain.
And you see these images of people having to evacuate their homes with, like, almost nothing.
It's heartbreaking.
Totally. And it's not just, like, regular folks. Even some big names have lost their homes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I read that Billy Crystal, Paris Hilton, and James Woods all lost their places.
Wow, that's wild. It just shows you how widespread this is.
Yeah, it's a real tragedy. Okay, so switching gears a bit, let's talk about the global economy. The IMF is predicting what they're calling stable yet underwhelming growth for 2025.
Yeah, I saw that. They're saying 3.2%.
But the big question mark hanging over everything is, of course, the Trump factor.
Ah, yes. Trump is back.
He's already talking about slapping new tariffs on China, Canada, and Mexico.
Which is making everybody super nervous.
For sure. I mean, some experts are even saying it could trigger a global recession.
Yeah, it's a risky move. Could end up hurting the U.S. in the long run, too.
Exactly. And speaking of Trump, his reelection has also reignited this whole debate about the H-1B visa program.
Right, the one for skilled foreign workers.
Yeah, sure.
It's definitely a hot button issue.
You've got people like Elon Musk saying it's crucial for attracting the best talent.
Which makes sense, in a way.
But then you have others arguing that it takes jobs away from American workers.
Right, and puts downward pressure on wages.
Yeah, a very complicated situation. Now, over in China, they're trying something interesting to boost their economy.
Oh, really?
Okay.
What's that?
They're basically encouraging people to trade in their old kitchen appliances for discounts on new ones.
That's kind of clever.
Right. So we're talking microwaves, dishwashers, even rice cookers.
Interesting. I wonder if it'll actually work.
It'll be interesting to see. All right, moving on. Former President Joe Biden gave his first post-presidency interview recently.
Oh, yeah. What did he have to say?
Well, for one, he thinks he could have beaten Trump again.
He does.
Yeah. But he's also questioning if he'd have the stamina for another term at 82.
I mean, that's understandable.
Totally. He also dropped a bit of a bombshell. He's thinking about preemptive pardons
Preemptive pardons? For who?
for some of Trump's biggest critics. Liz Cheney and Dr. Fauci were mentioned,
Wow, that's going to cause some controversy.
for sure. And of course, he defended the pardon of his son, Hunter.
Right, that whole situation.
Yeah, a lot of people still have questions about that one. Okay, let's shift our focus to Chad for a moment.
Okay.
There was gunfire reported near the presidential palace in N'Djamena.
Oh, wow.
The government's calling it a little incident, but some reports suggest clashes with terrorist elements.
That's a little worrying. Chad's had its share of instability in the past.
Yeah, it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Now, some slightly more hopeful news coming out of Belarus.
Oh, good. What's happening there?
Well, for the first time in over 630 days, we've seen pictures of Viktor Babariko.
The opposition leader who was arrested.
That's the one. He's been held incommunicado ever since he challenged Lukashenko.
Right.
So it's given his supporters a glimmer of hope.
But who knows what it really means? Could just be a ploy by Lukashenko.
Exactly. Now, across the Atlantic, Donald Trump's at it again.
What's he done now?
He's reignited that whole thing about wanting to, acquire Greenland.
He's still on about that.
Seems like it. And Germany and France are not happy about it.
Well, yeah, I can imagine.
They're saying things like inviolability of borders and warning against any use of force.
It's definitely increasing tensions between the U.S. and its allies.
Big time. Okay, but let's move on to a more uplifting story.
Okay, good. I need a little uplift right now.
A baby boy was born on a migrant boat crossing from Africa to the Canary Islands.
Oh, wow.
And it happened on Spain's Epiphany holiday.
Wow, that's quite symbolic.
I know, right? Talk about a new meaning to the gifts of the three kings.
Definitely. What a story.
Okay, now back to some harsher realities. The Ukrainian city of Zaporizhia was hit by Russian shelling.
Oh, no.
At least 13 people were killed and many more injured.
That's awful.
President Zelensky called it a cynical attack. They hit residential buildings.
Just another tragic reminder of the toll this war is taking.
Absolutely. But there is a bit of good news coming out of Iran. Italian journalist Cecilia Sala has been released.
Oh, that's a relief.
She was held for several weeks. Most people believe it was retaliation for the arrest of an Iranian engineer in Italy.
Right, a tit for tat kind of thing.
Yeah, it was a pretty tense situation.
Yeah.
But thankfully, diplomacy prevailed.
That's good to hear.
All right, and now for our final story of this segment. We're heading down under to Australia.
All right.
It seems they're having a bit of a cabanagate, you could say.
Cabanagate, what's that all about?
It's this whole controversy over cabanas on the beaches.
Really? Cabanas?
Yeah, these big beach tents, they're everywhere apparently, and it's causing quite a stir.
Why is that?
Well, Australians are really attached to their beaches. It's a big part of their culture.
Right.
And they see these cabanas as kind of encroaching on that shared public space.
I see. So it's about more than just the cabanas themselves.
Exactly. It's about fairness and equal access
Yeah.
and respecting that Aussie fair go spirit.
Makes sense. It's actually quite interesting how something like this can reveal those deeper cultural values.
Right. So we'll have to see how this whole cabana gate plays out. But that's all for this first segment. We'll be back with more news after a short break.
Looking forward to it. Yeah, it really makes you think about the price some people pay for speaking out against injustice.
It's a powerful reminder that freedom isn't something we can take for granted, and that there are people all over the world fighting for those basic rights.
Absolutely. And speaking of fighting for what's right, did you hear about that baby born on the migrant boat? It turns out it happened on Spain's Epiphany holiday. You know, the one celebrating the three kings bringing gifts.
Oh, wow, that's incredible. Talk about a symbolic arrival.
The rescue team said it was the best gift they could receive. It's a nice little ray of hope amidst all the heavier news.
Absolutely. So back to Australia for a minute. It seems that Cabanagate is showing no signs of slowing down.
You know, it's kind of funny how this whole beach tent thing has blown up into such a big deal, but it just goes to show how much Australians value their beaches.
Right. It's not just about a few tents on the sand.
Yeah.
It's about this idea of protecting that Aussie fair go spirit.
Mm.
Making sure everyone have equal access and enjoyment of public spaces.
It's like those cabanas are seen as a symbol of someone trying to take more than their fair share.
Exactly. And it's interesting how this has sparked such a passionate debate online. You've got people calling for stricter rules and others saying just relax and enjoy the beach.
It even caught the attention of the Prime Minister, who basically said, not cool.
Yeah, he wasn't too impressed. It's fascinating how something so seemingly trivial can reveal these deeper cultural values and anxieties.
Absolutely. It's like a microcosm of this bigger conversation about individual freedom versus collective responsibility.
So we'll have to see how this Cabanagate saga unfolds. Will there be new rules, or will Australians find a way to peacefully coexist with cabanas on their beaches? Only time will tell. Okay, let's move on to Canada, where things are getting interesting politically after Prime Minister Trudeau's resignation.
Right. The race to replace him is heating up, and Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative Party leader, is definitely one to watch.
He's got that tell-it-like-it-is style that some people find refreshing.
Yeah, he's been compared to Trump a few times.
And he's definitely tapped into this frustration that a lot of Canadians are feeling about the economy and the cost of living.
Especially when it comes to housing, it's become a major issue there.
His message of common sense politics and a return to traditional values is resonating with voters who feel like the Liberal government has lost its way.
But his critics say he's oversimplifying things and using populist rhetoric that could divide the country.
So it's a really pivotal moment for Canada, and the upcoming election will be a big one. Now, for a story that's a bit more somber, the assassination of a Cambodian opposition politician in Bangkok has raised a lot of concerns about the safety of dissidents in Southeast Asia.
It's a really disturbing development. Lim Kimya, a former parliamentarian from the band CNRP, was shot dead near a temple.
And while Thai police have identified a suspect, there are doubts about whether there will be a full and impartial investigation.
This is unfortunately not uncommon in that part of the world where governments often crack down on dissent and there's little accountability.
It's a reminder of the risks that people take when they speak out against authoritarian regimes. Now, shifting gears to a story that's both heartbreaking and incredibly inspiring.
Oh yes, this is the one about the Venezuelan political activist.
Exactly. He was recently released from prison, and he's been sharing his experiences of what it was like inside.
His story is just harrowing. He describes torture, inhumane treatment, and constant psychological pressure to conform.
It's hard to even imagine what he went through. But his willingness to speak out is incredibly courageous.
It's a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the importance of shining a light on these abuses.
His testimony also highlights the importance of holding those in power accountable for their actions and working to ensure that these human rights violations don't continue. Okay, let's wrap up this segment with a look at some diplomatic tensions that have emerged between the U.S. and Hungary.
Right. The U.S. Treasury recently imposed sanctions on Antal Rogan, a close ally of Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban.
This is a pretty unusual move against a fellow NATO member. It signals that the U.S. is getting serious about its concerns over corruption and democratic backsliding in Hungary.
The U.S. ambassador to Hungary, David Pressman, even accused Rogan of being a key player in what he called a kleptocratic ecosystem in Hungary.
Yeah, those are some strong words.
Yeah.
It's definitely put a strain on the relationship between the two countries.
And this comes right as Trump is preparing to return to the White House. He's been quite friendly with Orban in the past, so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
Will the Trump administration maintain this tough stance on Hungary, or will they try to smooth things over? It's a situation that could have implications for the future of NATO and the balance of power in Europe. It's wild, isn't it? Like, you wouldn't think beach tents would cause such a ruckus, but it shows you how much Australians care about their beaches.
Oh, for sure. It's like this sacred space for them. Everyone gets a fair go, right?
Exactly. No one's hogging the best spots with a giant cabana.
It's almost like a symbol of like inequality or something.
It goes deeper than just the tents themselves. It's about fairness, about community, you know?
It's about those Aussie values, yeah.
Speaking of values, this whole thing with Hungary and the U.S., that's a tricky one.
Sanctioning a NATO ally, that's a big deal.
It is. And the timing, right as Trump's coming back in.
Makes you wonder what'll happen next. Will Trump keep up the pressure or go back to buddy-buddy with Orban?
It's a tough call. You want to hold on to those democratic principles, but also, you know, NATO needs to stay strong.
Especially with everything else going on in the world.
Speaking of tricky situations, at least that Italian journalist, Cecilia Sala, is finally free.
That's good news. It was a scary situation.
It really was. Just shows the risks journalists face sometimes.
But it also shows that diplomacy can work, even when things are tense.
Exactly. Well, I think that about wraps it up for us today. We covered a lot of ground, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Fires, economies, assassinations, cabanas. It's a lot to keep up with.
It is. But that's the world we live in, right?
Yeah.
Complex, unpredictable.
And hopefully a little bit hopeful, too.
Exactly. So thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll be back tomorrow with more news from around the globe.